I want to take the time to make a review of my 2019 Specialized Turbo Levo Expert model. I've had the bike and been riding it since March 16th. I've got about 600 miles on the bike. Clearly, I've had enough rides in to understand what the ins and outs of this bike are. Not that I'm seeking entire perfection. One cannot expect that totally out of the box. There's a lot of things that you want to modify, but what I want to do is touch on all the thoughts I have as I walk around the bike. In the handlebar department here, cockpit, we got the brakes. I've got no complaints. These are the Code R SRAM brakes. They work great. They got metal pads. They make noise. When they're wet, they make lots of noise. But the noise is acceptable when they're not wet. When they're wet, nasty. I made a video about that and elaborated on the fact that I could play reveille with the brakes. Still got the factory aluminum bars on there. Some of my buddies have put on carbon. I'm just living them out for now. I can say about the SWAT tool, I had some issues with that early on. They just didn't assemble it correctly, which was a hassle. The little door that opens here where the tool is required adjustment, and the screws were not tightened to set the gap properly on the cover. So I lost the two ball detents out of it and had to replace those, which, by the way, if you lose yours, they're 3mm diameter steel balls. It takes two of them. And the key is you have to take the assembly out of the headset, and from the bottom you can access the set screw that fixes this bolt right here, which behaves as a pivot bolt. That bolt also, on its bottom side, has a Allen head that you can insert along its axis to hold it while you find the right gap adjustment. That's a little bit too much detail about the SWAT tool, but back to the bike. I guess the pike fork 150mm works pretty dang good. It's eating it up. It's not what I had originally wanted. I had hoped to, would have rather maybe have a Fox 36 factory, but I spoke to the brakes. The rims, I don't know, they're kind of light, but I guess they're working. The tires is an important discussion to have. I want to zoom in here on the Butcher Black Diamond tire I put on the back. BLK, was it? BLCK DMND. It's a identical tread pattern to the tire that comes on the front, the Butcher grip time. However, it's got a much heavier sidewall. I was amazed at how thick it was. I had to warranty the original tire because it tore away from the rim at the bead area, and this tire certainly seems to be performing pretty well. The front I've left alone for now, and people say that's probably good enough. We'll see how it works. But I was running probably a little bit lower tire pressure. I've been running 25 psi, and maybe it just didn't like that in the back. I've added these zip ties on the swing arm to retain the chainstay guard, just because I noticed it was loosening already. That's just the way adhesive works. It's not going to work as well as if you have something that's mechanically holding it down. So I won't have to mess with that. The flat pedals, I put the 1-ups on here, and they've been working fine. I like having the flats. I got these 510 Freerider Pros. They work well together. It's definitely a plus having the 700 watt-hour battery. I've enjoyed the hell out of having that extra size, and that was one of the big motivations for getting the Expert model. I've got a large size here. Oh, the seat. I must say the seat itself sucks, and I've just haven't got around to replacing it. All my buddies have replaced theirs. And speaking of the seat and the seat post I'm just not very excited by. Again, eventually maybe I'll replace it. I've been living with it. It just requires a ton of fumbling, and I would call it a POS, for piece of shit. Specialized should, you know, spend some more money and give people quality on that, instead of trying to get their own crappy brand out there. Yeah, the seat's not very comfortable. I've got another one laying around I'll throw on. What else can I say about this bike? I mean, it's been a dream. It's really a solid machine as far as the performance of the bike. You know, the motor and electrical system. I can say this switch up here I am not pleased with. The buttons on here for power, this is down and up, and this is the walk mode button. And then in the front right here, that's the switch that if you press it, it'll go straight to turbo mode, the max position. But the button I have to fumble with. The plus doesn't always activate. I guess the switch is just, it could be better. They need to do some more work on that. It's got kind of a rubber membrane over it. So I guess those are my main points. But again, one of the most important things about this bike, and why I would say I highly recommend it, is because the torque on the bike is great. I don't care what everybody says about numbers. There are numbers on this. I've seen the graphs, and I don't believe the numbers are lying. You know, Shimano's 70 Newton meters. The Bosch motor, I think, is 80 Newton meters of torque. Yamaha's 85, and the Broza is 90 Newton meters. I feel the torque in this thing, it works great, and it's integrated well. The transition from the support mode to the peak mode is very nice. Support mode is like the basic level that you're operating at. There's support and peak power, and depending on which setting you are in on the switch here, whether you're in the low, middle, or high position, it has different default settings from the factory, but you can change these by using the app called Mission Control, which I don't want it on my phone. I don't want to use their app as a way to track things and give them my data. The only thing I wanted it for is the use of tuning the motor, but I've left it in the default. So support for what they call eco mode is 35%, and then 35% for peak. But when you switch to the middle setting called trail mode, it's 35% support and 100% power for peak. When you switch to turbo mode, the max, you get 100% all the time. Support and peak are the same. I'm tempted to drop the support level in eco mode down to possibly 30% or less, just as a means to save power, energy rather, battery life. So it's not always needed. If you're in decent shape, you find that you end up, you're getting more power than you need, more torque. What else? I guess the derailleur works good enough. I don't have any issues. I always make sure I shift when I'm not under load, and the bike could, potentially damage the chain. I think if you're too torquey on the cranks when you're shifting. So I just always pause, make sure, because it's not a conventional bike and the chain's not that much bigger. But again, back to how this thing performs. It's great on switchbacks. I've learned how to really operate it at slow speeds and take sharp corners. I've gone on big, rocky climbs. I've gone some sort of trials, like going over bouldery stuff, and it's just really a well-mannered, well-behaved bike. I think I totally support this as a bike. From the, if you get the base bike and you want to just put all the components on yourself and save some money, the upgrades, that might be one route to do it. But I did the math, and it's kind of tough to try to get the 700 watt-hour battery, which is 40% bigger than most batteries out there on the bikes are 500 watt-hours. So I get easily 35 miles in on a ride. No worries. I mean, it just depends what the terrain is like, what level of power you're in, how you're gonna do. But clearly I've gone eco mode the first ride, 5,400 feet of climbing on technical terrain and about 35 miles. I did that. I got a video of that from my very first ride. It's just a great thing to have. I highly recommend having the 700 watt-hour battery, unless you're doing a lot of shorter rides. But one of the reasons I wanted this bike was just so I could do higher mileage rides. It's not so much that I wanted it so I could climb stuff, but it's proven to be really powerful to do a lot of climbing. So